Alright, we have 14 slides and 15 minutes, no pressure. Here we go. Let's jump in. So each part of the plant plays an important role for the plant, okay? So there are three major parts that you need to know: roots, stem, and leaves. Those are the three major parts. Obviously, there's some more. You can see fruit and flower, but not every plant has a fruit and a flower. So the three parts that all plants will have is a root, a stem, and some leaves. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up, because you can only go up once you hit the rock bottom. So roots. So these act as anchors for the plant, and it makes them very hard to pull out. So just like a boat, I know with Lake Anna, a lot of you have been out on a boat before. If you drop the anchor, it'll settle down into the bottom of the lake, and your boat will not move very far from where it is. It's an anchor. So same thing for the plant. So you might have been sitting out in the grass, and you might pull up a blade of grass, and you got the whole root, and it's dirty, and it's white, and you pull it up, and you're like, man, look at this, so cool. So, sure, you're like, Mr. Riddle, it's not very hard. Yeah, grass has very short roots. Go try and pull up a tree. I dare ya. Even just a little baby tree. You're not going to do it, okay? Those roots go deep, deep down into the soil, sometimes tens of 20s of feet down into the root or into the soil. You're not going to pull up a tree unless a really big windstorm comes through. Trees are going to stand up pretty much no matter what. So they do absorb water and minerals from the soil, and sometimes they store foods. So some of my favorite foods are actually part of the roots: onion, garlic, potato, sweet potato, parsnips. I don't like parsnips. Turnips. I don't like turnips. Carrots. Those are all parts of the root of the plant. So if you eat any of those foods, you're actually eating the roots. So I think that's pretty cool. Stems. So we're moving up. We're moving out of the soil. These carry the substances between the roots and the leaves. That's basically its only job, is to move stuff from the roots, move water from the roots up, and move sugar from the leaves back down. They also do provide support for the plant. So if you pick up a, let's say a flower, yeah, that's a pretty typical thing. The stem's going to be pretty tough, okay? If you try and break your stem, you're really going to have to put some effort into it. It's not nice and soft like the petal or bendable like the roots. The stem has a really thick cell walls, remember that. So it wants to get closer to the sun, so it's going to stand straight up pointing towards the sun. If you eat asparagus, you're actually eating the stem of the plant. I don't know any other stems that we eat off the top of my head. I'm sure there's some more, but I like asparagus, so I'm actually eating the stem of the plant. So I think that's interesting. The stem contain both xylem and phloem, and a bunch of other cells that you need to know because they have really long names like parenchymal cells. Ugh. Okay, so phloem, xylem. Remember that xylem moves water up and phloem moves food down. You need to know those. Woody stems have layers or rings. This is like a tree. So if you would happen to cut through a tree, you would see rings or layers in the bark. So that is part of woody stems. Not all stems are woody. Asparagus is nice and soft. Roses are soft. Some bushes are kind of soft with their stems. But a lot of times big trees are going to have bark. I like to flake it off. Like I would peel that piece off right there. And the leaves, we have talked about leaves before on a plant. These vary in size and shape, from needles all the way up to leaves that are as big as a small dog or a small child. A lot of, I think Hawaiian culture, they roast pigs, they bury them down into the ground, and they line their little dug thing with leaves, with I think it's big, I want to say banana leaves, but I don't know if that's actually right, but it's ginormous leaves, and they actually cook the pig down in the ground with the giant leaves. Remember that the leaves capture the sun's energy and undergo photosynthesis in order to make food. So photosynthesis is when we take water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight, and we change it into oxygen and glucose. So the leaves are responsible for doing that. That's why the leaves are always green, except in the fall when they're starting to die. So the middle of the leaf is filled with phloem and xylem, just like my toes. My toes need blood, so it has veins in it, veins and arteries. The leaves need food and water. So the phloem and the xylem goes all the way from the roots, all the way up into the stems, and then all the way out into those leaves. Remember, I think we talked about this word before, stomata. The bottom of the leaves have stomata. So here's some pictures, these little yellow cells. Those are all stomata. That's where the gas is going to come in and out. So when you breathe out your carbon dioxide, it's going to flow into the stomata. Photosynthesis is going to magically happen, and it's going to fart out oxygen. So when you're breathing in your fresh oxygen, it's coming out of these stomata, or these holes on the bottom of the leaves. So, I jumped the gun a little bit. So carbon dioxide comes in through the stomata, the water comes up the xylem, the sugar moves down the phloem, and the oxygen leaves through the stomata. So here's breaking down photosynthesis one step deeper that we hadn't done before. Carbon dioxide comes in from the stomata, water comes up through the xylem, sugar flows down through the phloem, and oxygen farts out through those stomata again. So plants do begin their lives as seeds. We talked on Monday about seeds. We talked last time about seeds. Excuse me. So I told you about how when I was a kid, I grew pumpkins and then we decorated them. I know one year I did like a Batman thing. I wasn't really even into Batman. So I planted that seed. I watched it grow for months and months and months because pumpkins take a very long time to grow. I watered it. That pumpkin seed eventually did turn into a pumpkin. Okay, because remember when we dissected tomorrow when we dissect the bean, you're going to see the baby plant. That there is a partially developed baby plant inside every single seed. Here's an avocado seed. So inside of there, if you would be able to break it open, you would actually see a tiny little root, a tiny little leaf, and a tiny little stem. So that once you push this thing down into the ground, you would get a brand new plant. So plants are picky though. If a seed lands in an area where conditions are favorable or good, then the plant's going to grow. If I would take this avocado seed and plop it out here in my yard's full of dirt. That's good. The plant's going to grow. But if I would take it to the beach where it's sandy and salty, this plant is not going to grow. It's very picky. It knows that the salt is going to kill it. It knows that the sand is not going to be strong enough to support an avocado tree. So seeds actually kind of have a little brain in it. So we're going to see when we do the bean dissection lab that seeds actually have three major parts. An embryo or a baby. Okay, you started your life as an embryo. Stored food. So we get our food from our mommies when we're inside mommy's belly. But plants, they don't have that. So they have to pack their own lunch. Okay, so we're going to see the stored food when we dissect. And then a seed coat. So here's a bean, okay, any kind of bean, lima, navy, black bean, pinto bean, cranberry bean. Here's your embryo, okay, it's a little baby plant. You got your leaves, you got your root, and in between's the stem. Here is a bunch of food. So that plant is living off all of this food here for a very long time until it can start doing photosynthesis. And then the brown part here along the outside, that's called the seed coat. That's protection. So that as the plant gets shoved down into the soil, and as it starts to grow, it is protected so that it can have good conditions to grow up in. So we're going to be able to see that when we do the bean dissection lab, all three parts. So I kind of spoiled this one. The embryo has a beginner set of roots, stem, and leaves. It has to, so that when you push it into the ground, it can start to grow. So it will use that stored food until it has time and the parts it needs in order to do photosynthesis. So that food has to last long enough for it to push out of the soil, get a stem, and grow towards the sun. It has to last all of that time, and then eventually the plant will be big enough to start to do photosynthesis. But typically that does take a little bit of time, so that's why it packs so much food. Okay, so the seed coat, this kind of acts like plastic wrap or like a baggie. So think about like leftovers or maybe your lunch. You might put some food in a plastic baggie or wrap it up in some saran wrap or press and seal. It protects the food from drying out. Okay, when I have leftovers, I put it in a bag or some plastic wrap so that I can eat it again tomorrow and it's not all dried out and crusty and gross, excuse me. So same thing here. That seed coat is going to prevent it from drying out. It's going to act just like plastic wrap, and it's going to keep that seed nice and moist so that it can grow. Okay, it allows it to be inactive for a very long time. So I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but you don't have to buy fresh seeds to go plant. Those things live at Walmart or Lowe's or your flower shop down the street for months, if not years. You can buy a bag of seeds from Lowe's, keep it, you can give it to your kids, they can give it to their kids, and then your grandbabies can plant seeds, and you're still going to get a plant. Okay, that's super duper cool. So the seed coat acts like a protective layer, keeping it so that you can keep the seed and keep the plant for a very, very long time. So in a lot of fruits, a lot of foods, it is going to be surrounded by a fruit. So maybe we can look at this if I can remember to find something. So an avocado, okay, has that brown pit in the middle. The brown is the seed coat. And then the seed coat is surrounded by that yummy green flesh, the actual avocado. So it has an extra layer of protection. So imagine taking your leftover chicken, putting it in a bag, and then wrapping that bag in plastic wrap. Or bubble wrap, excuse me, my goodness. Bubble wrap. That's like extra protection for your food. No one's touching it, no one's hurting it, no one's eating it. Because you got it double sealed. So here's a really good picture. It's a peach. Okay, so in here, so this part right here, you have your embryo. Then you have some stored food, okay, your endosperm. So this stuff around here is your stored food. Then you have your seed coat. Then you have all this delicious peachy fleshiness also protecting it. So that's your bubble wrap. That's the extra outside layer. Once the seeds are formed, they do need to be moved away from the mommy plant. So think of an acorn or an oak tree. Okay, oak trees make acorns and they fall straight down. So if every single acorn fell straight down and then made a new tree, my front yard would be so overpopulated it would be ridiculous. So acorns actually wait to germinate. They wait until they are dispersed or moved around in order to grow. So a lot of times this will mean animals eating food, barb-like structures that cling to fur, wind or water, or ejection. And I'm going to link a video that you can watch. It's kind of like a rocket launcher. The plant actually shoots their baby seeds all over the place. So think about it this way. If your parents had 3 kids, and then each of you had 3 kids, and then each of them had 3 kids, you would have like a bunch of people in the same house. And although there's nothing wrong with that, you'd get crowded. Okay, there wouldn't be enough beds, there wouldn't be enough toilet paper in the house ever. So you move out, and then your babies move out, and then your grandbabies move out. So just like people, we want to be moved around so that we're not overcrowded. So that's the video I'm going to link. You guys can watch it later. So moving away from the parent increases the chance of survival so they don't have to compete. That's the major reason here. Kind of like I just described. If your parents had 3 kids and then you had 3 kids and then all those kids had 3 kids, you're going to fight for toilet. You're going to fight for the shower, fight for toilet paper, fight for the laundry machines. You're going to fight for beds. Oh my goodness. So if you move out, you don't have to fight for stuff as much. Okay, so the last step, I got 1 minute. My timing's almost perfect. As the seed lands, they begin to germinate. This is when the embryo begins to grow and push out of the seed. So I'm going to put that pumpkin seed down into the soil. I'm going to water it a few days. I'm not going to see anything at all. But eventually I'm going to see it absorb some water. The roots start to poke out. And then the leaves and stems start to breach and poke out of the soil. And eventually I do start to get a pumpkin plant. But germination does not happen overnight. It actually takes a little bit of time. Maybe if we think about it, we can germinate some plants in a mason jar or in a plastic baggie, and we can watch that process. Maybe Miss Sewell will have some insight on that one. So go to Google Classroom or look at the front board to see what you need to do next, and I had 8 seconds to spare.